I'm taking you inside another data centre, but this one is special because it holds 42% of Australia's federal government information. Can you explain to me the use cases that federal government has for cloud storage facilities like this? Is it intelligence? Is it tax office information? Roughly what's in these walls, David?
Yeah, all those things.
Wow, that's cool. Look at the size of it. That's pretty awesome. You've been building data centers for
25 years.
A long time,
Yeah.
Decades, right? How are you thinking about national security in that context to ensure that these sites are as secure as possible, especially with the type of information that you store here, while also expanding?
Physical security is really important. We'll see some of that today.
Data centers are being constructed at massive scale in a rush to build more compute. But none of this is new to David Tudehope, who started building centers in the early 2000s.
But I really want to know about the history of this company. I believe you started it with your brother in '92.
Oh my gosh, true. So Aidan and I started the business in '92. It was a tech startup, as we now call it. Back then it was just called a small business.
It's crazy to think that once upon a time it was a startup.
Yeah, and it is. So we started with the deregulation of the telecom sector. That was how we started out. We had just had our own money, so it was really frugal, and we had to sort of do everything we could to save money everywhere. And then we kind of expanded to data centers. We listed the company, expanded the data centers, and put all the money from the float into the very first data center built in Sydney, near Central Station in Sydney, which is still operating today, 25 years later. And then we built more data centers, and cloud computing platforms, cybersecurity, etc. But yeah, it's been we've had to innovate and change and adapt as the years went on. But at the same time, we haven't lost some of that entrepreneurial roots, the need to be, value money, the importance of managing costs, the importance of being entrepreneurial and making changes and adapting. But at the same time, we've tried to complement that as we've scaled with better ways of growing and developing people, better ways of managing risk. So hopefully we try to strike that balance between sort of our entrepreneurial roots and being a listed ASX-listed company.
So what was the trend in the early 2000s that made you and your brother think, we should start building a data center?
Yeah, well, being the first data center, it required us to sort of reverse the normal thinking at the time, which was a company's computers were always at a head office, and all the telecom network would run at a head office to be the hub of the spokes. But the way we saw it was the opposite would come true, that with modern computing, why would the computers need to live inside the head office? Logically, they should be in a third-party data center, which is far more reliable and built for computers rather than sitting in a corporate office block. So today it's so obvious, and of course that's the way it is, but back then the idea was pretty revolutionary. But there were a lot of companies, fortunately, who embraced that idea and thought, yeah, it doesn't make sense having computers in our office, they should be somewhere built for them.
And the unit economics of putting them in a dedicated space is far better.
Economics, reliability, having people who do 24/7 management, all of that makes complete sense in a data center.
Would that have been a hard sell in the early 2000s though? People would have wanted them on their own premises for security reasons at the time.
It was more a culturally hard sell.
Okay.
The biggest problem was you had older heads of IT who were very proud of their computer room behind reception, and they built it in their early career, and they had smoky glass on the outside, and they used to take tours of people. So it was more of a cultural issue, and they used to go and meet the guy who did the servers and the battery company guy, and they'd always be in coffee rooms having coffee together and cigarettes. So it was kind of their world. It was like, you know what, all that, you don't need to do it. We can do it for you. So culturally, that was really challenging for a lot of, but then generationally, they of course retired and moved on, and new people came in and go, yeah, you're right. Why do we have a computer room behind reception? That's really silly.
And compare that to the market at the moment. I mean, it's just enormous. There's multiple players, private, public, that are building these things at massive scale.
It is enormous, but there are surprisingly a lot of larger corporates typically who still have their computer rooms, who still justify that somehow or other it's not the right time to move to a third-party data center. So that's an opportunity for our sector still.
Those are the people you still need to convince.
There's need to convince those, and public cloud companies have been an important part of convincing them as well.
Today, Macquarie Technology Group is valued at 1.7 billion Australian dollars, and David still has skin in the game. His family owns more than 40% of the listed company. Macquarie owns and operates data centres across Sydney and Canberra, all of which are certified strategic by the Australian government. They provide cybersecurity services for 42% of Australia's federal government, which, as you can imagine, requires super high security. It's a trend David says he's witnessed evolve over decades.
I want to start by talking about those more high secure customers. You have a lot of government customers. Talk to me about how you won over government contracts to become such a trusted government provider.
Look, for us, because we're proudly Australian and we've really doubled down on the importance of keeping data in Australia, onshore, which is so important for our country and for our regulations to be effective. We've really embraced the needs of government, both in terms of their security needs, as well as their information security needs, as well as the personnel security needs. So it's a market that has very specific needs, but if you embrace it, it really responds well.
Can you explain to me the use cases that federal government has for cloud storage facilities like this? Is it intelligence? Is it tax office information? Roughly what's in these walls, David?
Yeah, all those things. Government, in some ways, is like a corporate in that it's got critical information it wants to store. But I think the extra element is government does have set high standards for itself, and a lot of corporates do, which is a good thing. And probably that's grown from being initially very much around the obvious things of defence and intelligence to being critical departments. But in the modern world, even policy-based agencies have to have the same level of security. And I think we've had a couple of really dramatic examples in Australia where minor agencies that you would think wouldn't have anything particularly sensitive have been hacked, and they have been used as the back door into critical agencies. And I think that's where the Australian government's led the economy in saying, it doesn't matter if you're a large agency, a middle or a small agency, this is the baseline in terms of cybersecurity that we expect you all to adopt. And that's really driven government to use third-party data centers because we really invest in all these security elements, people, information, and of course the building.
From a business perspective, how does it benefit Macquarie Technology Group's balance sheet by having these government contracts? I imagine they're longer term, more stable type revenues, is that correct?
I think it's this idea of being built for government. And it benefits in that, yes, they are customers that when they make a decision, they do stick with it. Yes, they are a client who values the fact you've built these things in that makes it easy for them to comply with their own standards. But I think more than anything else, there is, I think, an inherent level of trust. And government, like corporates, are humans too, and they go, we trust people that embrace the things that matter to us, and that gives them that confidence that the risk profile is lower.
I've heard you talk about this elsewhere, about this human perspective that Macquarie Data Centres particularly brings to the market. Talk to me about that. I mean, do you feel like others are less human in this market?
I think it comes down to customer experience, and data centres like our cloud business and our cybersecurity business, people tend to focus on the technology, we do too, but the technology is only a part of the decision. In the years that follow, because we're in the business of operating, not just building or installing, in the years that follow, that's actually what the most critical element is. What's your experience as a customer? The analogy I sometimes give is that people tend to get very focused on, in say the world of cybersecurity, the mousetrap, or installing the mousetrap. And in our world, that's what firewalls to buy or what seams to buy. And they get very focused on the person who's going to install it for them. But what they overlook is over the next 3-5 years, mousetrap operations. Who actually is going to take out the old cheese? Who's going to put the trap somewhere effective? Who's going to take out the dead mice? All those parts that are actually, when you think about it, the most important bit for effectiveness. Yeah, people tend to focus on the inward part of the journey, and not the 3 or 5 years that follow. And it's the same and true across all our businesses. It's the customer experience piece is as important as the technology piece.
Just still on this government portion of your business, we hear of hyperscalers, the Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure and Amazon Web Services, winning these government contracts in Australia and around the world, New Zealand included too. Just recently, Amazon had that $2 billion defence intelligence contract signed in Australia. I think investors may see that and be confused, given that they know that you have a large portion of government. But I know that you all work together in some often convoluted, complex way. Would you mind painting the picture for how the market, particularly providers like yours, work with hyperscalers, where you compete and where you actually collaborate?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting space, and even between hyperscalers or between software platforms, there's exactly the same ecosystem of there are parts where they compete, parts where they cooperate, parts where they're customers of one another. It's that kind of an industry, which is a bit like where we started in the telecom industry. It was the same sort of industry. So for us, we do all those things. We have two of the three largest global clouds in our data center. And we're really good friends, and we've done a great job for them, and we're very proud of the fact we've delivered on time for them, as well as on budget for us. So these are things that are really strong. We're also proud of the fact we've got partnerships where we deliver their services as part of our services. But there are other things where we have our own sovereign private cloud that is an alternative to a global cloud. And there's a really strong use case around organisations where keeping data onshore and national sovereignty is a big deal. So it is that kind of a world where you have multiple relationships. It works. Yeah.
Data sovereignty is a word that is thrown around this industry all the time. Is that something that you feel like is Macquarie Technology Group's advantage in this space, perhaps above hyperscalers?
Data sovereignty is, I think, poorly understood by a lot of business people in that it's one of those areas where when you click the I accept on when you buy software or your subscription, because you can't bother reading the 13 pages of terms and you know you can't change them anyway. What you don't realise is buried in those 13 pages is things like the data will be kept wherever we need to. Our follow the sun model will mean that people all over the world will be able to monitor your data sets. We have maximum flexibility because they're trying to run a global business, and I respect that. The challenge for business people and for the government is that when the data leaves Australia, it becomes subject to foreign law. And that means foreign regulators are involved. And most countries in the world these days have put legislation in place to say, to confirm that. It's always been a sort of a common law principle. It's the idea that you might be on a Air New Zealand flight, you might be an Australian citizen, you might be flying over Chinese airspace. But if an incident occurs, you're subject to Chinese law. You think, wait a minute, I was on a New Zealand plane, I'm an Australian citizen, and I wasn't even on land, I was flying over the top. It's the same sort of concept that applies to data. So if your data's stored, even just one copy of the data is stored outside Australia, you've now signed up for a foreign regulatory system in a foreign jurisdiction and courts, and you think, I didn't realise, I just clicked I accept on page 13.
What is the percentage of Australians' data in that type of scenario that is stored offshore, and how have you seen that change as people have kind of come to this realisation that, oh, perhaps some of this, especially in a government agency context, should be stored here?
I think for business people, it is unclear, and to some extent by design, it's not transparent where the data goes. It really is seen as something that's in the domain of a global software company to work out where to move data. They're obviously worried about utilisation and making sure that all their infrastructure, their servers around the world are fully utilised. Therefore, if they've got underutilisation somewhere, they'll obviously move things to underutilisation. So it's about optimising their business, which of course, we all get that and respect that, but there's a consequence.
Macquarie is one of a handful of dedicated data centre builders in Australia, making the most of data sovereignty desires. I've taken you inside CDC data centres before, another privately owned operation that wins government workloads. While ASX-listed NextDC just announced a $2 billion Australian dollar investment in Melbourne, and Nasdaq-listed Equinix invested an extra $240 million in data centres down under. Another player, AirTrunk, is owned by Blackstone, and that doesn't include any of what the huge hyperscalers have planned.
AWS very recently announced a $20 billion Australian dollar commitment to building more data centres down under. Does Australia really need all that compute? And if so, what for?
Look, it's great to have global companies committing to data centre capacity in Australia. A lot of that's, of course, going to be bought through data centres like ours. So it's not self-built as only a portion of what the large global cloud companies do, because it's quite challenging to do that for them. But it's a mix of both. So I think that there is, from an investor point of view, a real opportunity to be part of that headline investment from AWS, as it is from Microsoft and Google and others. So the opportunity, I think, is real as a result of those investment decisions, but they're so good. I mean, you do want global clouds to invest in Australia or invest in New Zealand. You don't want it to be all served out of the United States for all the reasons we've talked about in terms of sovereignty and jurisdiction and things like that.
Just to clarify, does some of that, say, $20 billion commitment from an AWS or another hyperscaler, do they come to you and your company and say, hey, do you want $2 billion of this? We'll put that into your expansion?
The way it works is that But most of the global cloud, in fact, all the global cloud companies, most of what they buy from third-party data centers like us or other companies in our industry. They don't build it themselves.
So that tells me then that it's actually not net increased compute because you were building it anyway. It's more just a financing mechanism, or does it actually fuel your expansion?
It fuels your expansion.
Okay.
Yeah, because the expansion is effectively driven on your expectation of take-up, and when the customers are talking about doing a lot of take-up in Australia, that's a good thing.
The site we're filming in is currently expanding, and Macquarie is actively searching for new sites to build more data centres and the power to run them.
Wow, that's cool. Look at the size of it. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so welcome. This is IntelliCentre 3 Super West, and we actually ended up putting 2 data centres together. We were originally going to build 2 data centres, but we combined it, hence the super bit.
On top of each other or with?
We put them together. So
Okay.
we're going to build 2 more data centres. We made 1 very large data centre instead. And the reason was just extraordinary demand from global cloud companies, global software companies for data centre capacity. And there's obviously also some real efficiencies of having scale. So you can see here that we're about 1 year into a 2-year build. The data centre construction is on time and on budget. We've got nearly 400 people working here on site during the construction phase on any particular day. As the years go on, we'll be adding more and more mechanical plants. So in some ways, there's always an element of construction in a data centre site.
So once this is all complete, how many data centres will you have in your entire network across Canberra, Sydney?
So all up, this is data centre number 6. This campus here has 3 data centres, the original one we saw, the new one we're standing on, and the one behind us, which has been built. We're 1 year into a 2-year build.
Is it at capacity yet? Have you sold any of the space or no?
Yeah, today we haven't sold any space. That's pretty expected. Capacity is normally sold when you get close to completion because customers like to see that it's a data centre they're buying capacity in. So last time we sold our capacity about 4 months before opening, and we'll see what means for this. But there are also a lot of customers who don't buy until they see the data centre's finished because from their point of view it's lower risk.
You've been building data centres for
25 years.
a long time,
Yeah.
decades, right? How has what's required in a data centre today changed from when you were first building them in the early 2000s?
In some ways the outcome is the same, which is about creating a really reliable environment for computers to operate, super reliable power, suitable reliable cooling, nice low humidity for the computers, and incredibly good operations to make sure there's never any glitches. That's all still true, but the technology has changed enormously because people are buying more and more high-powered servers. They're now adding GPUs for AI, and all that means they generate more heat, they consume more power. So you've got to build a data center to consume much higher levels of power and heat.
From like a sheer property play perspective, what are the things that you look for when you're building a data centre? How critical is central location, proximity to a substation and power? How do you think about all of those things combined?
Yeah, the interesting thing about data centers, because they're assets that will run for 30 to 50 years, you've really got to build them for the long term, and access to power is very important, access to reliable power is very important, but also thinking through the expansion over the years is equally important. And it's that long-term perspective that need to actually plan ahead, things like how would you do maintenance once you've built it in an efficient, cost-effective way? How will you add new capacity, new power capacity to the site? Very important. And that same sort of questions have to go upstream to the power company. How will the power company upgrade their substation for you as you scale? How will the upstream power grid also expand to support the substation to support you? So there's quite a lot of complexity in data centers that mean that there's a real prize for getting it right.
Once these sites are operational, there's another critical element to get right.
As you scale, which you are doing at massive scale, including on this site here, how are you thinking about national security in that context to ensure that these sites are as secure as possible, especially with the type of information that you store here, while also expanding?
I think the other part that's super important is the clearance of the staff. So we do government clearances of all our staff because at the end of the day, people is often the source of compromise. And of course, cybersecurity is super important. And about 40% of the Commonwealth government uses us to protect them against viruses and hackers. which means we ingest many billions of logs every day, so every internet search, every email search by public servants. And our job is to try to identify the tens of thousands of suspicious, the probably thousands of malicious, and maybe the tens of something evil before someone clicks on an attachment. So all those three things work together to give that confidence that it is actually truly secure, not just physically, but from a people point of view and a cybersecurity point of view.
We know that demand for data is increasing, given your expansion, but also so are all of those threats to critical infrastructure. Can you explain to me that threat at the moment? What are you seeing in your business, and is it scaling as you're scaling?
The cybersecurity threat is very real. I mean, it's much reported on. I think it's getting faster and smarter. There's no question that hackers are using AI just in the same way we are using AI to protect our customers. That feel like the game is accelerating. If you use the online gaming analogy, it's like someone's just sort of timed it up to 2x. Both players are playing twice as fast, and both players are using similar technology, and it's rising. So the game's accelerating. The underlying threats are new variants of old. To a large part, there are new ones, of course, as well. But that package just means the game's faster, and so we're seeing AI being used in that context pretty actively. And it also means it's very hard for people to do it themselves. The other part that's really challenging about cyber is patching. Everyone gets it that patching is really important, but for a lot of corporates and government agencies, patching is something they do sort of on Monday after their morning coffee and their change control meeting. But the most patches come out very late Friday night, Australia or New Zealand time.
Of course they do.
Sort of Friday, it's the US time on Friday. And as a result, they just sit there in someone's inbox for 3 days waiting for someone to come in on Monday. So speed of patching actually is very, very powerful. It makes a huge difference, and means that if you have that level of, there's so much evidence to prove that if you patch really quickly, the odds of an issue hitting you is very low. I mean, there are, of course, examples where these things occur straight away, but pretty rare. If you can patch in minutes, or maybe in an hour or two, the chance of you being hacked is so much less. And that's why I use the analogy of the cheese. It's the speed from which you operationalise is as important as what you do.
Given that you hold such critical government information here at such large scale, does that make you more of a target compared to others?
Yeah, I think there's definitely government's a significant target from, of course, foreign state actors. I think surprisingly for a lot of corporates, a lot of large corporates in critical industries are also targets from state actors. And of course it's a bit blurred too. People use the word state actor and it sounds like public servants in another country. But often there's these middle people that are hired by that government to do their work for them, sitting in some country that you might think, oh, I didn't realise that was a centre of it. So I think it's a bit blurred, but yes, the threats for government are, I think, as relevant to corporates. It just depends, I think, for corporates whether they're in an industry which has significance globally.
Thanks for watching Markets with Madison. If you enjoyed this interview, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. I do all of the research for these episodes myself, so your support means a lot. I always love to hear your feedback and ideas, so please drop any thoughts in the comments below. Now go put your money to work.